Right, so we're still waiting on the Super Slam Collectors page to come out, but at this point, we might as well start the conversation, right? We have a decent idea of where pool rates should end up falling, and then card prices as well are starting to, well, really settle in. So overall, Super Slam has really delivered, right? It has reprints at a really pullable rate, and even the Majestics and Super Rares are a lot more obtainable in Super Slam than they have been in previous sets. It has basically undone, vetoed, right? What we've been talking about since the Hunted High Seas, where things have just been on a path of escalation, whereas per the community, we have to open more and more product to supply playsets. So yeah, we'll take a look at some of the card prices using my Fabry list, which I will include in the description. Probably not something like this, right? The Super Slam expansion slots. I'll do the normal ones where I have, Rev Guardian Majestics, Brute Majestics, etc., right? So all the big cohorts of cards, but it is good to look specifically at the Super Slam expansion cards because, well, we have Felling, Snag, and Plow Under, and we can compare them to their original selves, and that is quite the contrast, right? So, cheapest version, most expensive version, and yeah, it's quite the contrast, right? So, Felling and Plow Under especially have drastically dropped. So, $9.80 US for a Felling and $4.60 for a Plow Under. The playset's nice and easy and is a proper fix, right? If we compared it to, for instance, well, let's do it. I don't have Command and Conquer on here, but Command and Conquer is the correct one to look at. So we'll stick Command and Conquer in here, and it should be right at the top anyway. But Command and Conquer as a reprint didn't serve to the same degree as this, right? So the History Pack product is the cheapest variant, followed by, I think it's the non-foil Unlimited. Then we have the Hunted, then we have the good stuff, right? So overall, it was a drop in the barrel, and it didn't really shake up the pricing, whereas Felling and Plow did, right? Now, that goes back to the whole question of what should generics be versus specific cards for specific decks, and Felling and Plow should definitely not be really expensive cards because they are, well, in a sense, niche cards, even if they are for one of the more popular sets of decks, I want to say, right? But yeah, so Command and Conquer as a reprint didn't really do much. It just stabilized things, if you will. Whereas Plow, Felling, Snag, they've all done their job and are really, really easy to get a hold of. As for the rest of the expansion slot, right, nothing is too crazy as well, right? Despite it being a bigger expansion slot, there's lots of inclusions that we can take out per the Rainbow Foil side of things, or even just filler there for cold foils, like the Pleiades armor set, for instance, the Pleiades Armory deck armor set. So overall, unlike, for instance, Bright Lights and its expansion slot, this is still relatively cheap, right? The most expensive card currently is Line Up the Leaves at $4.50 a copy. So yeah, it is really nice to see that they've taken to heart what I want to say the majority of the community have. Maybe not the loudest aspect of the community, but the majority of the community, it feels to me, where we want play pieces to play with. And the collectability has sort of been shifted to, well, the collectible versions, right? So in Super Slam, we have a lot of Majestics having cold foil extended art variants, and they seem to be settling into the prices of the top end of Majestics, or what they would have been, right? So yeah, overall that's wonderful to see. So now for the major revered cards of the set. So although this is revered Majestics, I need to tack the Super Rares onto somewhere, and until we get concrete wording that they will return, I'm just going to stick them with the Majestics regardless, right? So, for instance, we have Boots to the Board from the actual Armory deck for Pleiades. In Super Slam, it only comes as a cold foil, so that doesn't really do much for the pricing, but it is somewhat of an expensive equipment piece, right? In the purview of, like, Legendaries and really expensive equipment pieces, it's not, but it is an Armory deck exclusive, and it is quite the nice set of boots, right? So it's a 3-block equipment piece overall, which is already really nice, and some utility to it as well. So yeah, reasonable for its pricing. But then for all the other cards, there's not too many Majestics, right? I think there's only 2. So Crowd Goes Wild and No Hero Stands Alone, I want to say, are the Majestics. Then we have Super Rare, Super Rare, Super Rare, Super Rare, yeah, Super Rare, Super Rare, right? So there's 2 Revered Majestics, 2 Reviled Majestics, a handful of generics, I want to say 3 or 4, we'll get to it in a second, right? But overall, prices are very, very low, right? Very easy to obtain, and some of these cards are definitely playable, right? I'd say everything but A Good Clean Fight, Renounce, and Tame are really seeing play. Granted, half of it in Tough Nut, half in Pleiades, so half of it really good, half of it just okay. But yeah, pricing-wise, because of how easy it is to pull cards in Super Slam, they're not absurd, right? $4 at most for some of the cards, and both A Good Clean Fight and Never Give Up are more expensive than No Hero Stands Alone or The Crowd Goes Wild, right? So yeah, that is definitely really nice to see. As for the Reviled cards, so similar, we have a mix of Majestics and our Super Rares. once again, right? Not too many, but Fix a Match at the top as our Majestic at $6 for a playset, and I do think the Reviled heroes are seeing more play currently, right? But other than that, again, still nothing that stands out immensely, right? $2 for a Majestic is not that much at all. Now, I do also find cards like this kind of interesting. So the Rainbow Foil is currently cheaper than the non-Rainbow Foil, and it does seem like there's a few cards in Super Slam where the Rainbow Foils are easier to pull. There's a lot of different skewing with the actual pulls of cards where stuff is taken out on the Rainbow Foil side because it's been upgraded to a Common Foil, which just doesn't exist. So yeah, it is quite interesting. Again, that's why we really want the collector's page to really comb through it, right? Hopefully they tell us the short prints. At the very least, we know what's, again, not in certain card pools. But onto the Brute and Guardian stuff. So, for the Brutes, overall, both it and Guardian have never been super expensive, right? They've been one of the lower end of classes with really standout cards is probably the best way to put it. So, for instance, here, the two standouts are our Show of Strength, right? And our Outside Interference. So $5 a copy for Outside Interference, and then Show of Strength a little bit more because it is a nice 2 for 8, right? So $10 a copy. But again, nothing ridiculous, nothing super costly. I mean, in comparison, Swing Big is still more expensive from Everfest, because another thing to factor in is, again, Super Slam should be at a much higher print rate than at least, well, High Seas and the Hunted, of course, right? So yeah, overall, everything else just falls into place a little bit lower. Smashing Ground, I think, is one of our most expensive super rares, right? Reckless Stampede, Song of Sinnoh. Then for Guardian, similarly, Guardian was somewhat of a cheap class. They've been, escalating because of Mastercraft Guardian, the focus on it, right? But we leave them hanging up the top here, but that would simply be because there's not enough non-cold form versions being sold, I'd assume, on TCG Player. There's no real registered price yet, so we'll have to take a look at this again, right, in a little bit, maybe. But other than that, you've got, like, Cries of Encore, $9 a card, and then everything else sort of scattered down throughout the list, right? So, yeah, again, the range or spread, right, of Super Slam is definitely a lot more in check than previous sets have been, with nothing super standing out, right? Even the most expensive card, which would either be Cries of Encore, Leave Them Hanging, or probably Show of Strength, right, is only just pushing, $10, a little bit more than that, comparative to, again, Rosetta with what Felling, Plow were, Warmongers, High Seas with how Conqueror started, right? So, yeah, it is definitely really nice to see, at least for me, right? You may have misgivings or different feelings on where you want the rarity cards to actually place, because, again, Majestics have sort of had that dual role where they are the chase pieces, because they're what you get majorly in a box, right? A Legendaries want a case, gold foil, hit or miss, but at the same time, they're also definitely the majority play pieces at this point, and therefore need to be accessible, and therefore somewhat reined in. But super rares, right? So just the super rares in themselves. Smashing Ground, most expensive at $250, followed by Song of Sinnoh. Then Time Flies, Having Fun, right? Aura Disruption's definitely something we need. Cut the Small Talk, I think, does the same thing. Yeah, Tower with Aura Destruction, right? So, yeah, overall, super rares are very, very abundant, right? So you have stuff that is pretty much worthless, right? Turning Point comes in the Pleiades Armory deck as well. And then you have some more expensive stuff, right? Because it will definitely see play, because it's probably the high end of the super rare effects, right? Smashing Ground being some Arsenal Disruption is definitely really, really nice. And then that just leaves the generic. So, again, nothing super crazy, right? Warmonger's Diplomacy, although it's a legendary, is still vastly cheaper than its original, right? With the Rainbow Foil being very cheap, and then the Cold Foil, I think, sitting above the previous variants, right? Because again, it's that more of a chase aspect where it is harder to pull. And same can be said for the actual other legendaries in set, right? Non-foil Flick Knives or New Horizon, cheap. Rainbow Foil of the two in-set legendaries, cheap, right? And then a little bit more respect put back on the harder to pull variants, which is definitely nice to see. But as for the other Super Slam cards, I don't know if I can actually spot any, right? Oh, there's one, Overcrowded. Overcrowded comes in at $7, so it's not quite above the Brute and Guardian stuff, right? The top, right? Cries of Encore, Leave Them Hanging, or Show of Strength. But still, I think a reasonable amount, right? Where if you hit this Majestic, it sort of pays for your booster pack. And I think that's sort of a good feel. Granted, I wouldn't mind an outlier here or there if it was an outlier per novelty, right? Rather than outlier per actual playability. So overall, the game being more accessible, cards being a bit better to pull, definitely seems nice to me, at the very least, right? But, if you disagree, do let me know. And reasons why, right? So we can have a nice, good old discussion. But other than that, right, again, we can sort of speculate on the pull rate, so why don't we do just that? So when it comes to the pull rates, this is sort of what I'm working with so far, right? From my own pulls, what I've seen online, right? These are my estimations of the pull rates. So limited Majestic, so that's the inset. Again, there's not too many of them. I think 14 in total, right? So the actual Majestics that are generic, Brute, Guardian, Revered, or Reviled, about 1 in 7, right? So a non-foil is about 1 in 12, and a rainbow foil 1 in 18, so you're getting about 3 to 4 in every box. Super rares, 1 in 2, and I would honestly say it's under 1 in 2, but non-foils feel about 1 in 3 packs, and rainbow foils feel about 1 in 5. As for expansion slot Majestics, they appear to be 1 in 4 overall, so 1 in 6 for the non-foils, and about 1 in 12 for the rainbow foils. Again, summations, right? So could be a little bit higher, could be a little bit lower, could be a lot lower, could be a lot higher. But yeah, this is the general feeling that I have. And overall, what it shows is that Super Slam is definitely by far one of the easiest sets to open, coming close to the initial pull rates of Welcome to Rathe and Arcane Rising, which I think came out to about 2.75 cases to basically pull enough copies to equate a full playset of Majestics and Super Rares, right? Obviously, random chance exists, so you might not get 3s of each or 1 of whatever's a legendary. Well, it wasn't the first legendary Klloo. Yeah, I don't think there was any legendary keyword cards in Welcome to Rathe Arcane Rising. But overall, this means that going off of these pull rates, right, to get your playsets equivalent of limited Majestics, it'd take about 3 cases. So within 3 cases, think again from the community aspect, you're opening 42 limited Majestics, which would equate the count, right, for playsets of limited Majestics. Super rares, 2.5, and then expansion slots, 3 cases. So overall, wonderful to see, right? Again, is a great reduction from what the Hunted and High Seas fell to. And again, going back to Felling and Plow, right? For Rosetta, those cards, you find them specifically, either of them, right? Not both combined, was about 1 in 171 packs, right? To find specifically a Felling or a Plow non-foil or rainbow foil. The Super Slam, that should be at the bare minimum 1 in 144, if not less, because it does seem like Felling and Plow both appear more often than some of those other expansion slot Majestics. I believe the only things sort of being speculated to be short printed are the Golden Set and Snag. Everything else is common, and then Felling and Plow seem a bit more common, right? So yeah, again, in that perspective, not only is it easier to pull in Super Slam, but then you also have the actual print size for Super Slam most likely being greater than that of Rosetta. So overall, right, pull rates have been improved. The amount of cases the community has to open to supply cards has been reduced, and that is, again, kind of really nice to see, right? I was definitely expecting some level of course correction from what we've been talking about previously, but this is definitely a big U-turn. So yeah, it does make me sort of happy that LSS have just decided to pull the pin, if you will, right, and try to get things back on track. But in saying that, right, Super Rares go for Monarch 3, first set of next year. That's what we're still expecting, right? So yeah, it'll be curious to see if these rates stay or if these rates are just for Super Slam, and that would be sort of even more confusing if things just end up all over the place, and every now and then we get a set like this that's fun, novelty, and just a money sink, right? Because again, if you were buying X quantity of the previous sets and then did the same for Super Slam, you definitely kind of just lost your money, right? Because these cards are definitely just going to fall in place. Maybe the high-end stuff, the harder to pull, the cold foil extended arts, the legendaries, etc. keep you on track, but in terms of Majestics, Super Rares, and expansion slots, they are seemingly all going to really drop because, again, from this point on, we're going to get more and more stuff open, more and more cards hitting the market, and yeah, if they're already this low, usually we have that bigger bubble, right? I mean, we still had the world premiere bubble, but now things are definitely much, much lower. But we'll leave it there. Let me know what you think. Hope you enjoyed. Yeah.